It's a process of discovery. There is no one way, and enjoy the ride of learning about what living well means from so many different people. And that's, again, I hope that this podcast encourages folks to go out and have those conversations, because having those conversations is what's going to lead to a better world, I think, and more people flourishing and living a better life. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Reflections on Living Well podcast, where we explore perspectives on the good life in the 21st century. I am your host, Broderick. I hope you enjoy this conversation. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Reflections on Living Well podcast. Today, our episode is going to be a little different. I will have my dear brother, my good friend, Andrew Murphy-Rouse here to interview me. I know I mentioned earlier in another episode that I would do this, have someone come onto the show to interview me or have a conversation with me to address some of the questions that some of you have posted about who I am and why am I doing this podcast? Where am I going with this? What have I learned, etc. So today, bear with me, bear with us as we explore Broderick a little bit. I'm not going to tell you too much. A lot of this you've probably already heard if you've been listening to the podcast on a regular basis. But I want to give a warm welcome to my dear brother, Andrew Murphy-Rouse. How you doing, Andrew?
I'm doing good, Brad. How are you doing, my brother?
I'm doing good, man. I'm excited
Yes.
to have this conversation with you, man. You know, you like my brother from another mother,
Yeah.
he have you asking me the questions. You've been listening to the podcast. I think
Yep.
that's important too. That have someone who's been actually listening to the podcast, and I think you're a very articulate person. I figure you would be a very good interlocutor here and exploring why am I doing this? Where am I going with this? And yeah, what motivates me and moves me in terms of doing this podcast. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm honored to be here. I'm happy to be asking you questions, turn the table on you. We're family, so I'm excited to hear some of your answers, throw you some curveballs too. So I'm about it. So I'm ready whenever you are. I can just dive right in. I know a bit about you, Brad, and some of your background, and we all come up with stories about who the people are in our lives that we know, and who the people are that we don't know.
Mm-hmm.
So to kind of start that, who do you see yourself as? Who is Broderick from Broderick's eyes?
Well, before we dig into me, I think that it would be beneficial for the audience to know a little bit about you and
Nah, that's good, man. We're
how
good.
how we keep saying that we're like brothers. But I do want to say a little bit about that. Like Andrew and I met when we were both living and working at a yoga center in the Santa Cruz Mountains here in California. And yeah, we just really connected, literally like brothers. And we've been I guess like brothers since. We've
Yeah.
been connected like that ever since that time. How long ago was that?
We met each other back in 2009,
Yeah,
and
that is
uh,
right.
and then we hung out for a little bit, and then I left the mountain, you left the mountain, then we came back in 2010 and reconnected, and then just we've been kicking it ever since.
Yeah.
Virtually a lot of times, digitally, over the phone. So gratitude for those technologies that we can stay in touch, but yeah, we chat, to the audience. We chat, almost weekly. So I almost get my own like double dose of the podcast every week. I get to listen and then I get to chat with you as well.
Awesome. That sounds good. And then, by the way, now Andrew is a financial advisor for what's the name of the company again?
Edward Jones, yeah.
Edward Jones. That is right.
Yes. So
So
I went from yogi to finance. It's quite the trip.
yeah, we won't talk about that. No, I'm joking.
Yeah, yeah.
No, it's good though. I think that's an important piece of the puzzle. I think to living a good life is having some type of financial literacy, and financial freedom can be very beneficial to the good life, of course. So so don't downplay working in finance. I mean,
Yeah, no.
every sector of society has their demons, and
Well,
every
that is the truth. I mean,
that's
just pull up
right,
some documentaries. But no,
right,
and we can dig more into that stuff when we flip it again sometime in the future.
yeah,
But yeah,
yeah,
man, it's life's a trip, and we've been on these journeys with each other.
yeah,
And yeah, we've known each other now for 15, almost 16 years.
yeah. Wow, isn't that something?
Yeah, yeah, it's great.
All right, I guess now I've been trying to, I guess, hide
Yeah,
away
you're
from.
hiding from it.
I know,
So who
right?
is when we're looking at it, and you ask your guests a lot of times, tell me your story, tell me about yourself. You give an intro and do that, but who is Broderick? When you're looking at yourself and you think, who am I, and you think about your life, how would you frame that for the audience and for yourself?
Oh wow. I don't like talking about myself that much, so I'll figure out how to say this in real time. Um, wow, who am I? I think how I like to really I don't want to say define myself. How I like to describe myself primarily as a person who's interested in love in the world. Love motivates me. I just want to see more goodness, love, and beauty in the world, and that's my primary driving force in life. That's why what drove me to doing this podcast, which we can get into later.
Hmm.
But I primarily like to see myself as that. Now, there's a historical aspect of myself in the tangible world,
Hmm.
where I grew up in rural South Carolina, um, in a small farm town, and which I love. I still
Hmm.
love the boonies, as we used to call it.
Yeah.
And I do consider myself still a country boy, even though I've lived in urban environments most of my life now, actually.
Hmm.
But that rural country life is very, it's a very, I guess, how should I say this? It's a prominent aspect of who I am.
Hmm.
I like the quietness and the the stillness of small town, or even for me, not even just small town, but rural
Yeah.
country
Yeah.
life. It's such a strong piece of who I am. And from there, I went off to college. I'm a first generation, um, first one in my family to go off to college, and that was big. Actually, I really didn't have any plans for that. I was, I played sports, football. I was really into football, track, but I had an injury my senior year that kind of knocked me off of the football path.
Hmm.
I mean, I could have done it, but I decided to go off to school. Grateful for all of the support and help that helped me make that decision and helped me fill out my application and everything to go off
Yeah.
to school. And man, it was such
Uh,
a big thing for me. It changed
I,
everything.
yeah. I imagine it was a lot to learn being first generation. Navigating a different world. Yeah,
Absolutely.
and so
Oh,
football path. You're saying that wasn't working out. So what was the path you took with school then?
academics, man. I guess I didn't really know what I was doing. I'm
Hmm.
just to be honest, I really didn't
Yeah.
know what I was doing. I was really good at math and science. I didn't read nothing really other than my science textbooks. So that part of my skill set was very alarmingly not very good. But I had mentors and teachers that encouraged me to go into engineering basically. And when I went to Clemson University undergrad and went into engineering because someone suggested it because I like math and I was good at math and
Hmm.
science. And when I got there, I fell in love with chemistry and thought, oh, I should do chemical engineering, and that's what I did. I'm happy I did. It taught me a lot. It was very challenging. It was different. It was the first time I've been on a college campus, and I'm telling this backstory because a lot of this has to do with why I do what I do now.
Hmm.
Because people helped me along the way. I had support. And if those folks would not have encouraged me to go off to school, I don't know where I would have ended up.
Hmm.
I'm sure I would have. had a stable job, and probably done very well because I was a relatively disciplined person. I was self
Hmm.
motivated. Um, but the whole college academic educational pursuit was very new to me.
Yeah.
So yeah, I went off to school and had internships and to different places. It just blew my mind.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
was amazing when I reflect on it now. I'm like, wow, it completely opened me up to a new reality, and I'm forever grateful for that. And that's one of the reasons why I value education and learning so much, because of that experience that I had. It's very tangible for me. I can feel it. I know what it's like
Yeah.
to be very ignorant about the world and to go off to a school 2 hours away from my home,
Yeah.
only 2 hours away, and to be around a bunch of kids, um, exploring and learning. Such a valuable experience. But
Yeah.
so
Kind of.
undergrad was good. Yeah.
I would imagine a shock to your worldview as a whole, right? Kind of expands it. So you're saying here you're a country kid and did some school, but you were really relying on football, right? And then you go to university. Now you're talking about chemical engineering. So that's expanding your world, I'm sure.
Oh man, big time. It's just
Yeah.
completely different. Yeah, completely different way of looking at things. But it was good though. I it opened me up. I mean, I saw the contrast,
Hmm.
and it really fired me up about the value and importance of learning and education. It
Hmm.
was difficult, particularly when it came to literature and reading and stuff like that. That was hard for
Sure.
me, and it
Yeah.
took many years to get to a place where I could decently articulate myself, at least in well, you can standard English, I suppose. Because I mean, I can speak pure Ebonics, Southern Ebonics. That's my original language, and I can do that. That's
Hmm.
without no problem. Um, but I couldn't. It was challenging for me to communicate in standard English, to be honest, because my vocabulary was very small. So all of that was really good because, and that's an important part of my story is
Hmm.
learning and understanding the value of education was significant. And throughout that experience, all the internships, I just learned. I came into contact with so many different people. And I ended up going to graduate school in chemical engineering. And what motivated me to do that was I had an opportunity to do it, and I was encouraged to do it because people thought I could do it. Um, and I was like, well, why not be a professor? I was really motivated to be a representative of black folks and black men in education. And I wanted to like, hey, I have this opportunity. Why not? Why not go to
Yeah.
graduate school and potentially be a professor in chemical engineering or work in research at some chemical company or something like that? And I decided to go and I applied to Georgia Tech. Went to Georgia Tech for graduate school and Atlanta, Georgia. Just I went from a small college town in Clemson to Atlanta, Georgia. Ooh, culture shock again.
Oh, sure.
That was great though. Atlanta was awesome. I learned a lot. I got exposed to ideas related to the African American experience that I
Hmm.
was not aware of before. I'll put it
Hmm.
that way. And I started reading. And I think my reading journey actually started the summer before I went to Georgia Tech when I was spending some time in Houston. I had a friend of mine encourage me to, hey, you should read a little bit more. And I was like, yeah, I don't like reading. I was like scared of it or whatever. But I really got into it when I was in Atlanta, and I
Yeah.
fell in love with reading. And it was hard because I
Yeah.
had not done it much at all. And again, outside of some physics text, I read a whole physics textbook or chemistry textbook, but beyond that, it was frightening
Yeah.
to read
I
like a
imagine.
novel.
Yeah.
I'm like,
Yeah.
oh God.
I imagine, and I'm struck that there aren't a lot of people that start in a small kind of rural community, first generation, college, and then decide to go, to graduate school, let alone get a PhD, right?
I know.
Especially in something like chemical engineering. And I know offline, you and I have talked a lot about this, about the importance of exposure. So, kind of on this as we're exploring this backstory, I know a lot of your personal story, but on this backstory, we're looking at it. You went to graduate school, you're pursuing pursuing all of this, and it sounds like exposure after exposure is what kept moving you forward.
Mm-hmm.
So where's the journey go from here? What so you went
Oh,
to Atlanta, right? So then where did it go from there?
oh man, Atlanta was so good for me. It cracked my shell. I thought again I was interested in. I want to help. I want to give back to my community.
Mm-hmm.
Again, that motivated me to go to Georgia Tech. But I was ignorant. And again, when you
Yeah,
don't read much anything, you're like, oh, I want to help, I want to do something, but I would just put it this way: I was speaking from a very ignorant place,
sure.
and I don't necessarily mean that in a derogatory sense. I'm just not knowing, lack awareness of history and context. And so while I was there, I really fell in love with that. And in the process of doing that, I was reading stuff about health and wellness, along, again, while I'm in graduate school doing my
Mm-hmm.
thing. And I really fell in love with this health and wellness thing. Like, okay, by the middle of my time at Georgia Tech, I was like, about 2.5 years in, I'm like, I really want to do something associated with health and wellness. This is where my passion is now. I'm like, yeah, I can go and be a professor in chemical engineering and et cetera. But I'm like, how do I help the community? And I think where I
Mm-hmm.
can make a big impact is associated with health and wellness. And I was like, no, I'm not doing that. At the time, I was doing all kinds of woo woo stuff in terms of changing my diet and
Mm-hmm.
experimenting with herbs and hydrotherapy. I'll just put it that way.
Yeah.
I mean, trying all kinds of stuff. Some of it just completely way out there, but I think it opened me up though to what was
Mm-hmm.
possible, and I came into contact with people who were doing some of the same things, and I'm reading all this stuff, and I was like, well, I don't want to do conventional medicine. I'm like, no,
Mm-hmm.
and I really, by the end of my time at Georgia Tech, I came across this naturopathic medical school. Someone introduced it to me when I was spending some time in DC. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And I checked it out and it looked like it was legitimate. And I was like, well, it was a hard decision. It was
Mm-hmm.
not easy to choice to make. I was like, you know what? I think I'm going to do this because something inside of me is really pulling me in that direction where I'm like, well, my goal was not to be a doctor, not the doctor,
Mm-hmm.
but to build a wellness center basically. I'm like, well, I need to learn something about it. So my hunger for learning, again, it started when I made that transition from high school to undergrad, where it just literally blew my mind. I really understood the value of learning and
Mm-hmm.
education. And that hunger was so intense throughout my time at Georgia Tech. Yeah, I mean, I ultimately made that hard choice. I did finish my PhD at Georgia Tech. I was quite the annoying person. I will just put it that way. When you're first learning something, boy, I
Yeah.
was annoying. I
But
was so
why? But
annoying.
why? But why? Right?
Yeah, no, I'm like,
Yeah.
everybody should do this and you should be this way. Oh, I think about that and I'm like, oops. But I need to go
Yeah.
through that phase.
Oh
I
yeah.
need to go through that intensity. And I decided to go to this naturopathic medical school in Seattle, Washington. Another big,
That's an adjustment. You're going from
oh,
the south to the Pacific Northwest. That's a pretty big adjustment, bro. So tell me
oh my
how
God.
that exposure and that adjustment felt. How because that's a big
Oh my
change.
God.
You're going culturally. That's a big change. Climate. That's a big change.
Mm-hmm.
So tell me a little about what that was like.
I didn't know what I was getting into,
Mm-hmm.
and forever grateful that I did it. It was, I'm leaving Black Atlanta.
Right.
Just culturally, oh, I felt good in there. I like the heat. I mean, I grew up in the South, so I
Mm-hmm.
like all that hot, heat, humid weather. And to go up to the Northwest, and I went there for the school, and man, it was one of the best decisions I've ever made. And even though I used to have like, oh, you went to a woo woo school. Why are you doing this woo woo thing? They want to
Mm-hmm.
like, feeling like, oh, you could have just went to, conventional medicine and got your and still did the same thing. That battle was always inside of me
Sure.
because trust me, man, when you're an engineer, even though I come from, quote unquote, poorly educated environment, to even though I went through that, and I mean, I had a little schmugness. Though a lot of people in science can be smug and
Mm-hmm.
think that they know everything. They're doing the real. education. This is the most
Mm-hmm.
valuable thing, and like especially conventional, and doing something unconventional like natural. Even though I was experimenting on myself, to go to that school, I had to go through a lot of that internal dialogue,
Yeah.
that internal resistance, because I wanted to fit within society. But man, that experience, the Northwest for Seattle's like the Emerald
Mm-hmm.
City, man. It's beautiful. Yes, it's wet and cold, but the beauty outweighed it those 7 years, 6.5, 7 years I was there. I really got into backpacking. Even though I grew up in a small rural farm town, I never
Mm-hmm.
backpacked and camped and stuff like that. Um, yeah, I really got into that nature. I mean, I did all kinds of experimentation there. I learned a lot through naturopathic medical education.
Mm-hmm.
It is an I know a lot of the things that people are talking about now. I'm like, yeah, the quacks been talking about this shit for years,
Right. Right.
and the so-called quacks, yeah, are there out there people in there? Absolutely. But what people don't know, a lot of the stuff that those naturopaths were doing, they got from MDs
Right. Right.
earlier on. So are there people that are out there? Absolutely. And
Yeah.
but I still think it's amazing. That experience helped flip my understanding of reality. It helped
Mm-hmm.
me question that. And that led me into, I was primarily interested when I got there in nutrition and like hydrotherapy kind of stuff. But I really expanded. I got into herbal medicine. But more importantly, I really got into counseling and
Mm-hmm.
physical medicine and that combination. I had got a little exposure to yoga when I was in Atlanta,
Mm-hmm.
but when I was doing the counseling, the psychotherapy, and I'm reading again, I'm like my reading is off the charts. I'm like every day,
Mm-hmm.
um, woo woo stuff, conventional stuff. I'm just reading like crazy,
Yeah.
and I'm learning intensely at the school with my classes as well as my reading. And
So you went from one extreme of hardly reading to now you're in this other
oh
extreme of
yeah,
fully like head in reading all the time.
oh,
Uh,
full on
yeah,
intense,
yeah.
crazy intense, and but it was awesome. I
Mm-hmm.
was learning. My world was just expanding, and I became addicted to that expansion. Not addicted, but I saw the value in it, and I was like, wow, this is amazing. And some of it, again, I look back at it, I'm like, okay, that was a little crazy, but it was important for me to open myself up to those possibilities, and that's what that Bastyr education did. The wonderful people that I met, the things that I've learned, has definitely helped me be where I am today.
Mm-hmm.
By the time I finished there, I was mostly interested in getting to the root of suffering.
Mm-hmm.
Why do we make the choices that we make? So again, when I originally went there, I wasn't quite interested in being a doctor,
Yeah.
um, but I really felt that my calling was related to why do we do the things that we do, and
Mm-hmm.
what is leading us to do that. And so how do I get to the root cause of our choices? And
Mm-hmm.
those choices are related to well-being or suffering. And I don't think you can eliminate all suffering, but there is unnecessary suffering. And with that understanding, I mean, of course, I've done meditation. I didn't do much yoga practice while I was there, a little bit, but I got into meditation. I mean, I guess that's yoga, but Buddhist
Yeah.
meditation, a little bit, but I wasn't consistent. I mean, if the work was demanding and my reading was demanding,
Yeah.
so I couldn't do so much. And when I graduated, I hung around for about a year, practicing a little bit, doing mostly craniosacral therapy, which was that awareness of body mind connection
Mm-hmm.
and working with that. And then I decided I need a break. I've been in school nonstop, 15 straight years of post secondary schooling.
That's a lot.
Literally, I didn't
Yeah.
take a break.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, I'm gonna go on a sabbatical. And during that time in Seattle, I really got into capoeira. Capoeira is
Mm-hmm.
this Brazilian dance and martial art. Passion, love of my
Mm-hmm.
life. And so I said, you know what? I'm gonna take a break. I had a friend that was in Hawaii. I went
Mm-hmm.
to the Big Island, and stayed there for about 4 months. While I was there, I started like, okay, I want to get back into this yoga thing because I could see um, how yoga can be beneficial to well-being.
Mm.
But I didn't know to the extent because I was primarily aware of yoga asana or the physical
Mm-hmm.
practices of yoga. And while I was there, I focused my primarily on the physical practices, but I got into like breathing exercises. I was like, oh wow, this is interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Some meditation and yogic meditation, but it was mostly breathing exercises and physical posture exercises. And then, and of course, I was training capoeira every day. I'm like, when I go for something, I go for it.
Yeah.
And still reading.
Yeah. Yeah.
But Hawaii was good for me. I mean, I didn't
Yeah.
really take a break. It was like I'm forever a student. So that level of intensity of learning, I don't know. I'm to this day it's hard for me to break that.
Yeah, so it
Um,
sounds like you turned off the, the structured education side and took the more, let me start the physical education side and let me,
uh-huh.
go into the exploratory of life experience education side.
Oh yeah.
So from the Big Island, where did things go from there?
So I really felt I was like, oh, yoga is it.
Mm,
Yoga, I'm like, this is the way I can do it if I teach this
mm,
stuff. And then I said, okay, I need to go and learn more.
yeah.
And then I went to Kripalu, this yoga center in Massachusetts.
Hmm.
Then I went back to my home in South Carolina. Thought I was going to go back and help, and that's another story. I won't go there right now. And then I ended up going to no. Did I go home for no? Then I went to Mount Madonna. That's where I met you.
Yep.
I went to Mount Madonna Center. So let me go check out these different yoga centers. And man, I was intensely learning everything I can get my
Hmm.
hands on. I pretty much tell people, I'm like, man, I literally have a master's in yoga.
Oh, definitely,
When
definitely.
you saw
Yeah.
me in my intensity, I mean,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
every
Well,
facet of it.
we did our YTT together,
Oh, that
and
is right.
I know how much I put into it and how much you put into it, and I know I was like, man, you probably don't even need to do this, but all
uh,
right,
I
yeah,
know. Folks, I'm intense. I'm slowing down at 50, but I was a pretty intense person. I pretty much lived like a monk. I have been
yeah,
living like a monastic for a while, actually. Up until recently, I'm a little bit more householder like, but yeah, that experience, and then I ended up staying in Mount Madonna for another year. Yeah, I went to the Zen Center, so I was
mm-hmm.
trying to learn as much as I can around meditation and Buddhism and yoga and the yogic tradition, and it really opened my mind. And I saw and I realized that yoga is a toolkit for now. This is how I'm going to word it. And the traditional yoga is about liberation from suffering.
Mm-hmm.
And the way I look at it is it's a toolkit for a set of exercises, be it psychological exercises, physical exercises, spiritual, however you want to put that word that.
Mm-hmm.
You lump spiritual and psychological exercise together, that's fine. Psychic
Yeah,
exercise together, that's fine. And all of those different things in this toolkit is about facilitating the development of the person, the evolution of the person to realize its true nature. I'm like, this is it.
yeah,
This is my
yeah,
interest long ago around how do I get to the root of suffering. Oh, this is it. This is the root of suffering. And this is where, the root of also well being, ultimate
mm-hmm.
well being. And so that's what drove me and motivated me. And then I ended up, after I left Mount Madonna, I came to the Bay Area because I wanted to continue my study and practice of capoeira. And I figured the Bay Area would be a good place for me to try to explore teaching and finding my work. And I've been here in the Bay Area ever since. And last what? Since 2012,
Mm-hmm.
11, end of 2011
Yeah,
and
like
12.
about 12, 13 years. Yeah,
Yeah, and I've been
yeah,
here exploring, experimenting, doing
yeah,
all kinds of stuff, teaching yoga, meditation, doing workshops for various nonprofits. I've done so many things,
yeah,
teaching capoeira to kids, adults. But it's all centered around this idea of how can I help mitigate unnecessary suffering and
yeah.
enhance well-being. Now, there's a lot of complexity associated with that. But that's where I am today. I know it's a long story, but
Yeah,
I
but
think it's important to see why I'm doing what I'm doing right now.
yeah, and it gives a backdrop, right? So like one thing that strikes me is And one of the questions I was going to have is, what's a main interest in life for you? But I think more, verging away from the question, I think you kind of highlighted it.
Mm-hmm.
You had famine from education, right? And those are my words, right? But as you were growing up, it sounded like you had a thirst to learn more once you got a taste of it, and
Mm-hmm.
then you became ravenous for it. And so now it's been this. Again, I'm sharing my perspective of what I heard. It became a journey of continuing to learn, and and so when I'm looking at it, as your friend, but also as someone that's just looking at the story of it, is you're a person that has continued to chase this education trail. So when I think of the question, Broderick, what would be your main interest in life? Do you think it'd be fair to say, well, personal development, education, like learning, and on that, how does that tie into your relationship on your life's mission, on what you're wanting to do here forward? So we got your backstory, right? And now
Mm-hmm.
we're in today. So what is the thing that drives you, your passion, today? Is it that continual ravenous of education, or is it helping, uh, yeah, just that, I guess.
Oh yeah, continually educating and learning. Now, here's the
Mm-hmm.
ultimate goal. How can I be a light unto the world?
Mm-hmm.
How do I express my divine nature in the world? I think that's my primary responsibility. That's my primary duty, is to be a beacon of love in the world. Now, I use love. One
Yeah.
can use anything. Love is just the word that I choose, or the qualitative way of being in the world that I choose, because love suggested that it's not just me in isolation, there's others
Mm-hmm.
involved. I can love myself, of course, be
Mm-hmm.
deeply connected in resonance with myself when I think of love. And how can I be deeply resonant and connected to others? So, again, that's love in
Right.
my relationships. And I think, how do I do that? Because I think at our essence, no, this is the story that I'm playing with now. I know
Mm-hmm.
language is only limited. You can, this is the story. I'm going to use these
Right.
metaphors because they all just metaphors. But this metaphor that we're all in of the expression of the same thing, of the same source. And that same source for me, I like to refer to it as divine.
Mm-hmm.
That there's some sacredness associated with it. There's beauty associated with it,
Mm-hmm.
because it is, it's, this is, well, you're the philosopher kid, so I'm going to use words here, folks. I know that this is not the right set of words, but it's like it is connected in and of itself. It's just
Mm-hmm.
one essence. It's one
Mm-hmm.
thing. And we are all it.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's an expression of that thing. So
Mm-hmm.
it's quote unquote not connected because it's just one thing.
Sure, sure.
Yeah, no, it's not like two things. But people talk about this non-duality.
Mm-hmm.
What they're getting at is there is one, and we are all an expression of that one.
Mm-hmm.
And I refer to that one. One is still not the best thing, but whatever. As divine,
Yeah.
or some people refer to it as consciousness. Some
Yeah.
may refer to it as God. But that we are an expression of, and my duty is to be and consciously try to be an expression of that divine, of my divine nature.
Mm-hmm.
How do I illuminate that in the world? Because if I am an expression of it, you are an expression of it. It behooves me in my agency to be as loving as I can, because that love suggests resonance and deep connection.
Mm.
That deep connection is a realization of what the divine is. Because when folks talk like God is in between two different people, or the divine can be seen in
Sure.
between two different people. When people are in love with each other. And I'm not talking about
Mm-hmm.
romantic. Put that romantic love to the side. I'm not talking about that. That's an aspect of love. I'm talking about love in a sense of resonance and connection.
Mm-hmm.
And when we do that, we are revealing the divine in that space. And how do I uh, develop my capacity to do that? I do that through learning, through
Yeah.
education. And I'm not talking about necessarily institutionalized education, but learning and education in general. That facilitates development. And I'm not talking about just cognitive learning,
Mm-hmm.
not just learning how to form sentences and how to use words, these various metaphors to describe and phenomena and create stuff. That's a part of it. But education is also subtle too. It's
Mm-hmm.
sensual. It's body. The whole what we refer to as the subtle body,
Right.
is all of that. Is there's capacity to learn in that space as well. So that's why I see myself as, that's me. My number
Mm-hmm.
one duty is to do that. And me, I feel like I'm an educator.
Yeah.
I'm a student of life, but most teachers are love to learn.
Well,
And I
yeah, and you know where we met, Mount Madonna Center, right? Yoga Retreat
mhm.
Center. The teacher there, Baba Haridas, Baba G, always said, "Teach to learn," right?
Yeah,
So you can be an educator in part to continue to learn.
exactly.
And so it strikes me, and again, we know each other pretty well, right? But it also strikes me in this conversation to know that one thing that moves you is you want to be bright light in a world that some people will focus on negative things. If you spend a lot of time on the news, it's nothing but negative, right? And it doesn't matter which side of the aisle anyone's on, it's gonna often be nothing but a negative bias. So in bringing a brightness, a lightness to the world through media, through a podcast, I think is an important mission. How do you see using that mission both to again better yourself and also reach to people that maybe aren't in that place of I want to be in love and in connection with people, but more I want to be out for mine, and
Mm.
I'm maybe not even at a point of recognizing potential damage I'm doing to myself, whether I'm just scrolling through social media and I'm again, it could be either side. I've seen it both sides get addicted to this idea of everything's negative. So how are you using that and this podcast as a way to and why a podcast? Like why is this the medium that you're choosing to try to be more of that loving light in the world?
Oh wow, that's a hard question
Yeah,
there.
that's loaded. I got you on that one, bro.
Yeah, you did. So here's the deal, folks. I think where I am today with all of this, I think I spent a lot of my life, because I've always wanted to give back, man. I mean,
Hmm.
I really genuinely love the world. I really want to see goodness in the world. You know this about me.
Yeah, yeah.
And I've sacrificed a lot of things in order for me to do that. And along the way, I've realized that I might want to share this with people that I care about.
Mm,
And that means not just my family, not just African Americans. A lot of my family, African Americans. My desire to help these communities is what motivated me to be on this path.
mm-hmm,
Um, but I can desire to want to support and help and all of these things that I've learned. I can desire all I want to say. I'm going to use this word, impose
mm-hmm.
this understanding, these ideas onto someone else. And I realized that no, you can't do that.
Yeah.
If a person is not, don't have any aspiration, don't have any desire for what it is that you're doing and what you have to
Mm-hmm.
offer, there's nothing you can do about it. And that's been hard. I mean, I think
Yeah.
that's in the last few years, here I'm 50 now. I've been at this for a while.
Oh yeah.
And the last few years, I'm like, okay, man, you can't make anybody be interested in what it is that you're doing.
It's
That's
that old adage, right? Lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink.
no.
You could try to force someone and even impose your views, and I think we both have probably seen this, in different ways. Even when teaching yoga,
Mm-hmm.
you can try to help people see how wonderful this is, and yet it doesn't resonate with everyone, right?
Yeah, I mean that's a good example.
Yeah.
Yoga. Yoga. I came here. I was like, okay, I want to teach all these different aspects of yoga, and I was younger.
Yeah.
I was in my mid 30s, but still, just there's a lot of things I just didn't get. And I came here. I'm all excited. I'm all like meditation, pranayama, philosophy. Yes, asana, all of it. You know me.
Oh
I'm
yeah.
I'm, I'm going to do it all. Comprehensive practice, and I tried and tried and tried to sell that, and a lot of people were not interested in it. And a lot of people were interested mostly in the physical aspects of yoga,
Sure.
and that's fine. And I think that you go into the whole studio scene. That's mostly what it is. Have I done other things? Yes, I've taught yoga teacher trainings, philosophy, anatomy, physiology, and all that
Mm-hmm.
kind of stuff. And but what I found was, what's the right word here? That it wasn't as fulfilling just to teach asana. I
Mm-hmm.
think it always came back to, when I say asana, folks, I'm talking about the physical postures, the physical practices, exercises, and but it just wasn't as fulfilling to me. And so I kept bumping up against that wall, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, no, I'm gonna keep saying all this stuff, but a lot of people just were not interested
Sure.
in the other aspects of it, the bigger picture. And I was like, okay, you can't force that. You
Mm-hmm.
can't force it. This is what they're interested in, and that's perfectly fine. That's for them in their life and where they are. And how do I meet people? I just meet people where they are,
Mm-hmm.
but it doesn't necessarily mean that I can serve them the way that I would want to. It doesn't. It also means that maybe I can't serve them.
Yeah.
Maybe that's a job for someone else. And I found that the most important thing for me to do is to be an exemplar of what it is that I'm attempting to do. And by the way, folks, my goal is to be a light unto the world. I am imperfect.
Mm-hmm.
I think we all are. I'm not some enlightened being, whatever the hell that means. And I think that it is a process, and I teach it that way. That it is a process of discovery over time, over practice, and over, as they say, lifetimes of
Yeah.
development
Yeah.
and evolution. And so now I find myself like, okay, now how do I put myself out there in the world and do what it is I do without compromising my
Mm-hmm.
values? There's certain things I'm not willing to do. I'm
Mm-hmm.
not willing to say, okay, just so I can get people in the door, I'm going to be the pranayama guy or the breathing guy. Oh, I'm going to be the, I don't know, yin
Yeah.
yoga guy or the yang yoga guy or whatever that the thing it is out there, or the guru who does one thing. They do a
Yeah.
dharma talk, or they do the satsang, and people come and sit and listen to them talk. That's all fine. I have to be true to me, and what I'm interested in doing is
Mm-hmm.
this comprehensive approach to developing oneself. That includes character development, not just awakening to
Mm-hmm.
one's realization of their divine nature. But okay, that's fine. That's only one piece of the puzzle. But what does it mean to also develop character? What does it mean to also take care of your physical health? What does that
Mm-hmm.
mean to also be responsible for not just yourself, but for others? I'm not trying to impose this on anybody. This is what I do. And now, I mean, just to address that one part of the question of
Yeah.
how do I meet, what can I do if I'm like, I can't do anything other than be me and
Mm-hmm.
share and put it out there. And I realize that it's a niche.
Yeah.
It's not a whole lot of people interested in it, and I'm like, that's okay, because this is my dharma, this is
Yeah.
my duty, this is my calling, this is what compelled me to leave chemical engineering 30 years ago or
Right.
whatever. It said nope. I'm not. I'm going to continue to listen to my heart and listen to that. And
Yeah.
so now, why? How does this relate to the podcast? I've been interested in doing a podcast for a while now.
Mm-hmm.
But more of this monologue, or introducing or interviewing people who've written books related to
Mm-hmm.
well-being, all aspects of it, spiritual, psychological, physical. I'm still interested in that, but this, as you know, about 5 or 6 years ago, I really
Mm-hmm.
started getting into, well, not that long, 4 years ago, I think, into Greek philosophy as
Mm-hmm.
well.
Yeah.
And this idea of the ancient Greek philosophy around, like, what does it mean to live well? What does it mean to live a good life? What is a life worthy of living?
Yeah.
And really exploring that, and those ideas, I'm like, this is very interesting. And that, I'm like, okay, then how do I, so with that interest in mind, and I'm seeing in the world, the various problems and issues
Sure. Yeah.
politically, the
Yeah.
level of polarization, but also a lot of the reason why I feel like a lot of folks are not interested in what it is that I'm doing, because they don't have a reason to be
Mm.
necessarily. And that reason, I think, lies within their narrative, their story about the
Mm.
world, and their narrative as it pertains to what does it mean to live a good life.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't have a good solid idea of what that means, you may not necessarily be interested in adapting a developmental program such as what I'm doing.
Sure.
And so I realized, like, okay, now a lot of people are not actually thinking about this. are not really given a lot
Right.
of thought. Only you see it in philosophical circles, and even
Right.
then, especially
Well,
in American philosophy, it's analytic. I
and
mean,
and it's tough. It's tough to know where to start, right?
yeah,
So that's part of it too. Is where's a resource, right? So I mean, with all of the media options out there, right? There's so many different ways that people are getting information. So many different resources, and it can be overwhelming.
absolutely.
And it could be you could have done Broderick's TikTok extravaganza about living well, about you could have done the
Mm-mm.
you name it, right? But you chose doing the podcast format, and it strikes me, and maybe this hits you correctly or doesn't. But when we talk about Greek philosophy, so my major was philosophy. You and I have talked philosophy for years, and obviously yoga has philosophy, capoeira has philosophy, um, naturopath and chemical engineering have their own philosophies, right?
Oh,
You want to talk
absolutely.
about smug, like in the philosophy circle, we're pretty smug that this is where it all starts, right? But when we look back at Greek philosophy, especially, that's what a lot of it was a lot of what it seems to me, the conversations you're working to have are it's a dialogue, and sometimes it's a symposium, but it's usually a dialogue where questions are asked, contemplations are had, and so would you say that the podcast is this is the platform that you wanted to have a resource put out there, or is it hey I want to have these conversations and continue to learn and enrich my mind, or both, or where's this the format that drove you as opposed to TikTok and or Instagram or whatever it is. Like I know you're on Instagram, for the pod, but and YouTube for the pod, but where is it that podcasting was the driving vehicle for you?
Yeah, so I was roundabout way getting there.
Yeah.
Like the so this format, you're right. The questions, you read Plato's version of Socrates, and I'm not saying I always say this. I'm not trying to be annoying as Socrates. I'm not even suggesting that you should be that annoying, because he has an agenda.
Yeah.
I mean, I do too. Everyone has an agenda,
He's
but I'm not trying
essentially he's essentially a 3-year-old that with like a 50-year-old brain, right? He's like, I'm just gonna keep asking why because I want to get you somewhere. So I got
exactly.
you. I got what you're saying.
Yeah. So I'm not quite
Like,
doing
come
that. So
on,
I'm
dude.
motivated,
Yeah.
inspired by that, but I'm not quite doing that. What am I trying to do with this is you're right. There's two reasons why. Well, there's
Mhm.
several reasons, but one of the main reasons why I'm a nerd. I love
Yeah.
learning. I want to have these conversations. The other reason is just like in those dialogues, is there one answer? I don't think it's one answer. And I
Hmm.
think that answer for what it means to live well can be unpacked.
Hmm.
And I think that this question should be asked outside of academia, and
Hmm.
not, and there's a select few people who are actually doing that in academia. It's too self-helpy for some of them. They just want to sit
Hmm.
around and analyze in sentences. But don't get me started on criticizing analytic philosophy, um, because the only reason why I want to criticize is because they're so damn arrogant and
Hmm.
smug. And I'm like, wow, you're so ridiculous, and thinking that the world is confined to sentences. But whatever, it's so childish that I can't even imagine that. It's hard to believe that it's the dominant form of philosophy. But at any rate,
At least in the
does it have
West,
a
right?
place? At least in a way, it has a place. I get it. It does have a place. I'm not completely dogging it, but when that's the thing, just a
Mm.
little reflection can help you understand that does
Yeah.
not. I don't need Wittgenstein to prove to me that analyzing sentences and words is going to tell
Hmm.
me everything about the world. But at any rate, and so that idea of like having these conversations, so I'm motivated by my own learning, but also I'm motivated by how do I inspire
Mm.
these conversations. I want to talk to people of various walks of life,
Hmm.
and I want an audience to be a witness to that, so they can vicariously have that conversation. So yes, some people are academics, some people are not, but particularly older people. Now this year
Hmm.
I'm going to increase it from 40 to older, but I've in a last year it
I
was
still
mostly
won't make
50
the
and
cut.
older.
I still won't make the
No, you
cut,
won't
bro.
make the
Yeah,
cut.
yeah.
No,
I appreciate
yeah.
it.
You do have wisdom, but I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
life experience definitely
You
means
need a
something.
little more.
You
You
need,
need a
you
little
need a little more experience,
so
a few
yeah,
more
yeah.
mistakes. So
Yeah.
so 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 I did that, and so I'm doing this
Hmm.
because I am interested in modeling to an audience these types of open-ended,
Mm-hmm.
creative, flowing conversation that is not an argument. It's a discussion
Mm-hmm.
where I get to play with my interlocutor in a conversation, a dialogue, exploring it. What does this mean? Because I don't think it has one meaning.
Mm-hmm.
I think there are some parameters, but within those parameters, there are various takes and perspectives. And I hope that people go out, listeners go out and have this conversation. I hope they have this conversation with people with different walks of life and try to understand what the different pieces are to the puzzle.
Mm-hmm.
But more importantly, uh, to see where are the common interests, what
Mm-hmm.
are the common parameters, what do we have in common, what is our common desire for good in the world, and really exploring what that really means. And maybe we'll learn something from each other, and maybe we'll learn how to. What my aim is ultimately is maybe we can learn to be a little more loving
Mm-hmm.
to
Yeah.
each other as a society. Maybe we can this can inspire more goodness in the world. So that's why the podcast, that's why the conversations to
Yeah.
inspire. I wanted to have these types of conversations. Yeah, I'm learning to
Yeah.
help so I can be a better person myself in the process.
Well, I love that because like how I hear it, how my brain and ears and all that hear it and interpret it is, you know, one of the aims are to help the listener just be open with curiosity and love on the heart towards another human, right? Like the idea that I'm not coming with all my preloaded, viewpoints, and instead let me approach life and people with curiosity, and kindness and love, and so, you choose a variety of different guests for that to have these conversations, and and some I know have they have very set teachers. Like I know a number of them have talked about Thich Nhat Hanh. Some have talked about they have Baha'i faith. So it seems you're looking in different areas. So how is it that you're choosing your guests? How are you just like, hey, you're a friend of a friend. I'm gonna look you up in a phone book. Oh, those don't exist anymore. Like, how is it that you're finding your guest and you're choosing them? Obviously,
uh,
there's an age limit that you're looking at, right? I won't hold it against you, but how are you really approaching that?
well, at first it was mostly friends, people I knew
Mm-hmm.
and through my various networks, and just call and ask, hey, I'm starting this podcast. Would you like to join? And some, and then from there I said, hey, do you have any guest recommendations? And that's primarily how I'm doing it now. I still,
Mm-hmm.
there are lots of people, lots of friends that I have. I mean, I've been around a lot of places, and there's lots
Oh
of
yeah.
people I have friends from various walks of life and various ends of the spectrum, and I try to ask them, and but also have people make recommendations. Sometimes there are people where I'm like, yeah, I don't know, that's a little out there, but I'm like, no, I'm going to have this open-ended
Mm-hmm.
conversation. Let's see. There are people that's been on this podcast that we didn't go into those things that I have different ideas about.
Yeah.
Different that we have some differences, and but I wanted to still have that conversation because I do believe I want to model that this is a good person for
Mm-hmm.
what I'm seeing in
Yeah.
them. But say for instance that we have very different views on vaccines. They
Mm-hmm.
can be into that, more of the anti-vax world, for instance, um, and I'm more not necessarily. I'm definitely not into just pure anti-vax and
Mm-hmm.
various conspiracy theories associated with that. And so we're different,
Mm-hmm.
yet I can have a conversation with this person and understand, like, wow, you have a genuinely interest in goodness in the world, and you listen to all of those different things. Oh, they're just getting their information from different resources than I
Right.
am, and yet they still have an interest in goodness in the world, and I can learn from that, and I can model how do we have a shared have a shared interest,
Sure. Yeah.
and also have a civil conversation exploring that shared interest in what goodness is in the world. And we're going to actualize that differently.
Yeah.
But the most important thing, like, oh, you're interested in, say, love in the world. I'm interested in love in the world. Let's keep the conversation going. I
Yeah.
don't have to annihilate you. You don't have to annihilate me. I'm definitely not interested in that anyway,
Right.
annihilating
Right.
anybody. But I'm just saying in general, And then there's something beautiful and remarkable that happens in that type of conversation. So I get people from various walks of life, and a lot of
Yeah.
them are recommendations, and I just go for it and see what happens.
Yeah, and what I hear there too is let's focus on where we can connect, and even if we have differences, let's not get attached to that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Let's be connected on where it is that that we connect as people, and I think that's great. Um, so kind of circling back too, I mentioned some of the people that you've had on, spoke highly of different teachers. I'm a big Thich Nhat Hanh fan myself, so I've loved some of those episodes. I've loved all the episodes. They each offer a different nugget and a different perspective. And so I guess where I want to go with this is, is there any kind of teacher, that you look at, or who have been teachers, or major influences on your life that have has led you to this idea of, I want to be, a these are my words, not Broderick's, but I want to be a loving light in the world, promoting loving kindness. Like, who's been the big influences on you, or do you have any teacher or guru that you're like, that's my person, or is it
Mm.
a mixed bag?
Yeah, I don't have any one teacher or guru that's my
Yeah,
person. No. But I grew
aside
up
from
a.
me, but no, I'm just like, right,
Yeah, you my financial guru.
right.
I am. So, no, I don't have any one person. I failed to mention a really important part of me and my growing up was I was a very religious kid growing up Southern Baptist,
Mhm,
and I think that Christian foundation is still there. The love aspect of that is a driving force for me. Um, I'm not a Christian any longer. I'm not a yeah. I don't consider myself a Christian. I belong to the Christian church. No, um, so that is a foundational that part of who I am, and particularly Southern African American
mm,
Southern Baptists,
mhm.
where it's not just the doctrine, but the vibe, the feeling, the singing,
So what is
the
that? Because I won't ever know that, right? I'm a
uh,
white Midwesterner that you right. So like, what is that? You're saying the vibe,
the praise.
mm,
Like it's the you get into flow states just from the
mm-hmm,
way the preacher preaches. I've forgotten what there's
mm,
a term for this. Also the singing and the
mm-hmm,
songs that we used to sing were old school.
mm-hmm.
What do you call them?
The
Uh,
hymns.
yeah, the hymns, but the old Negro songs are hymns.
Mm,
But they were, you know, uh, how can I sing? I won't start singing any of them now. But a lot of those it moved me in a way that's just
sure.
powerful. And later on in life, I'm like, it wasn't just the doctrine; it was the energy that was created in
Mm,
that environment that moved me in this way, that put me in touch with the divine. Yes,
nice.
it was inspired by the Christian doctrine, but it's something else magical that was happening that has stayed with me. It influences how I do everything today, like capoeira, yoga, everything. It's like
Sure.
you can create the favorable conditions through ritual to facilitate a connection with one's divine nature or get into a flow type of state. I mean,
Yeah.
yoga
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
talking about the various forms of samadhi.
Right. Right.
I'm going to use the word flow. It may not be the most appropriate, but to really, really deep states of flow
Mm-hmm.
and deepening those states of flow. And I think you can get that within those. I got that within that religious
Yeah.
context. So that right there has been influential. Buddhism for sure has been highly
Mm-hmm.
influential. Yoga philosophy, Vedanta philosophy, Taoist philosophy. Now the various philosophical traditions outside
Mm-hmm.
of the East, like the ancient Greek philosophy, be it the
Yeah.
Stoics or Plato, Aristotle, even later. I mean, man, I'm going to learn from everybody and
Yeah.
anything. I've learned things about the Baha'i. I don't know a whole lot about the Islamic tradition. I haven't
Mm-hmm.
really delved into that very much at all. But yeah, I'm just an open-ended guy. Some stuff
Yes.
with Sufism for sure, but just really interested in the mystic traditions.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm open to anybody that has something to say. I don't care if they're atheists. There's
Mm-hmm.
some atheists I've enjoyed listening to and reading that can help propel me in a direction
Mm.
of my desire to be a beacon of light and love in the world.
Mm.
So I'm pretty open. There's no one,
Yeah, so
wherever
back
the
to
wise ones are.
right, back to how your journey all started, right? You're
Yeah.
ravenous for education. So anyone, it sounds like, you feel you can learn from, and from what I'm hearing, this is also a piece of what is, a purpose behind this podcast, right? Is let me learn from anyone and everyone, and let me learn from the elders especially, and I love it. What would be a good, like, so if I'm someone that's listening to this, if I'm young Broderick, I'm 17, 18, I listen to this podcast, and I'm on this exploratory journey of life. Do you have recommendations of where to start, right? Like, do
Oh
I
man.
just listen to the pod? Do I get do I get the Bhagavad Gita? Do I get
Mm-hmm.
the Analects by Confucius? Do I get Plato's Republic? Do I get Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind? Like, where do you have anything that Broderick recommends? Is, hey,
Mm-hmm.
start pulling this thread.
Oh man, that's a hard question because
That is yeah.
it's so particular to each person. But before I ask that question, I want to say, I want to come back to one thing. As I
Yes.
was just saying about how I want to learn from everybody, I think that's the path of the yogi. Now, I
Yeah.
particularly teach through a Indian yogic
Mm-hmm.
language, for sure. But the path of the yogi is not limited to the various philosophies that comes out of India. I
Mm.
think the path of the yogi is like whatever tools can help facilitate the goal,
Mm.
the aim, and that is minimizing unnecessary suffering and
Sure.
maximizing well-being or revealing one's divine nature. So it's a very strongly yogic path is where I see
Mm-hmm.
myself. Now, where should one begin? Oh wow! Again, that's been a hard part for me. I think that a lot of the things, those things, those texts that you mentioned, are
Mm-hmm.
so far beyond most people's heads.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you talk to some young person like Broderick was, if you'd have said
Mm-hmm.
that stuff to me, I'm like, man, you the devil. I'm like,
Right. Right.
I'm a
Right.
hardcore Christian, man. I was
Right.
not hearing all that other stuff. And so I think that one needs to look at or listen to the podcast, but ask yourself the question: what does it mean to live well? What does a
Mm.
good life look like? I think asking the question, if you don't ask yourself questions, what is my life all about?
Yeah.
Who am I? What am I doing in this world? What is the world made of? Or what is the society all about? Asking questions is the start. Now, when you ask that question, go out and try to find answers and never give up on that. Never get
Mm.
sad, never be satisfied with one answer. And I think that that's my recommendation. Now, someone who's interested, particularly interested in the things that I'm doing now, I have a whole
Oh, sure.
cornucopia.
Sure. Sure.
I have a
Yeah. Yeah.
whole system that
But
I've outlined. But
yeah.
but someone who's particularly young persons, people,
Yeah.
ask the questions. That's
Yes.
it.
Yes.
Start asking yourself questions and say, I am willing to go out and seek the answers, and I will
Mm.
never be satisfied with one answer. I want to keep building my knowledge, and I think I want to have an attitude of continually learning.
Mm-hmm.
That's the biggest thing that I recommend.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And you kind of sidestepped my trap. I was trying to see, okay, can I corner do? But you brought it back to asking the question that I now want to ask you is, what does living well mean to you? What is the
Oh,
good life?
mm,
What does that mean to you?
simple, and I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, that's great.
I
Well,
think so. So I
education,
know
right, and exposure, and,
exactly.
and all that has been a piece of it. I think,
Yeah,
anyone that's been paying attention on this has
yeah.
realized, okay, Broderick really, sees continual learning. Now, this is me projecting onto you from what I heard, right? But in my experience hearing you and just knowing you for the last, 15 years is, okay, living well, at least educating yourself is a part of it. And even where you sidestepped, me trying to corner you, you're like, yeah, ask the question, learn, right? And exposure. But hearing it from directly from you, aside from I don't know,
Oh
what does it
yeah, I
look
know.
like for you?
So okay. I think that there are some parameters, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
still learning, discovering more as I go along. And I can say, okay, then, how do I care for my body, care for
Mm-hmm.
my mind, care for my soul, my spirit, and in the process also care for others.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when I ask the question, how do I do that? Because I think living well is a process.
Yeah.
There is no one way of looking at it. It's contextually based. There's no one prescription. Okay, if you follow these I don't know 10 or 100 commands or these 100 laws or whatever it may be, then you're living a good life. You're
Mm-hmm.
living well. I'm like, no, I don't think so. I think that it is a process of discovering how to be. I'm going to stick with that theme of loving in the world
Mm-hmm.
as a process of, okay, if I want to be loving in the world to the best of my ability, it's important for me to take care of my health, my
Mm-hmm.
well-being. It's better important for me to take care of my mind. It's important for me to have a certain level of equanimity of mind, where I'm not allowing myself to be overly disturbed by uh, the problems of life or overly excited about
Mm-hmm.
the goods of life. It's fine to be excited. It's fine to be upset about when things are not working, but I know it's not okay. Well, I won't say it's not okay. It's not. It doesn't behoove us to be stuck in any one of those
Mm-hmm.
places. So again, that's very stoic. It's
Yeah.
very Buddhist, very
But
yogic.
it's also very
Um,
Plato, right? Like, don't
yeah,
get stuck
yeah,
in the emotional mind, right?
exactly.
We have all three, right?
Yeah, and so how do we live our life in a way that yeah, you want to feel good. There's some feel good aspects to it, but it's not
Sure.
just centered about feeling good.
Yeah.
Because I can feel good for various reasons. I can feel good from eating a large amount of sugar, or
Mm-hmm.
I can feel good for not allowing myself to allow a tragic situation to be fixated in my mind and have
Mm-hmm.
a certain level of equanimity. That feels good to me. That's
Yeah.
pleasurable.
Yeah.
Having compassion for someone is pleasurable. Serving another one is pleasurable. So I think that there are a lot of different pieces to it. So taking care of ourselves, attending to these various aspects of ourselves. I mean, how do I develop my emotional intelligence?
Right.
And how can that be beneficial to me being a more loving person?
Yeah.
How to be more present in life? How do I care for my spiritual development? How do I care for my interpersonal development, my social skills? That's something that I can cultivate and develop. And how do I be good with another person?
Mm.
That's contextually based. What does it mean to be good with another person? Well, it depends on you and how you and that other person are interacting.
Yeah.
Not causing harm to myself, excessive harm to myself and others, not just humans, but other non-human animals.
Yeah.
So, from my view of what it means to live well, is very complex, and I can't unpack it all in this podcast. But I think that I've created a pathway, a system, or a set of tools that I'm continuously evolving and developing that helps cultivate and develop the whole person comprehensively
Mm.
and
Mm-hmm.
takes into consideration all these various aspects of what it means to be a human being, increasing one's capacity to be self reflective,
Mm.
to have self awareness, to have awareness in general. All these things are skill
Yeah.
sets to develop and that can help one play the game of life
Mm.
much more effectively, not for the sake of um, one's individual or personal acquisition of stuff
Mm.
to raise
Mm-hmm.
your social status. No, I want to play the game well in recognizing and knowing that the game is all the divine, that
Mm.
everyone is an expression of spirit or the divine or God. How do I play the game in being a loving person? How do I play the game in being an exemplar of that divine expression in the world? That to me is the path of the good life.
Mm-hmm.
What does that look like on a daily basis? I don't know. How sometimes I might need to
Changeable,
tell
right?
yeah, I might need to tell a lie. I can't say never lie.
Yeah.
Isn't that like that deontology? That's isn't that was it Kant was like, oh, you should never tell a lie, for instance. And it's like, well, no, sometimes you if someone is going to harm somebody and I know they're going to do it, I'm gonna lie. I'm like, yeah, they're not there. Yeah, I don't know
Right.
what happened to them, and it might be hiding in my house, and I'm completely
Well,
okay with that.
it's nuance, right? Nuance
Exactly.
is something I think in today's day and age, especially, it seems like we've almost gotten, maybe we've never actually been far away from it, but we've almost gotten further away from this idea of understanding nuance. And again, maybe this is is just what we've always gone through in the human story. But I think nuance is a big piece, right? And
That's
it's a
it.
big piece of like as you get more exposure of people, of stories, of ideas, I think it becomes more and more like, no, there is nuance. If I'm going to say I'm never going to lie, I have to understand that there's a nuanced situation where I might lie. You know, it might benefit me and others to, you know, to do that. And, you know, and it strikes me, you know, I know you've had some of these beliefs, and I'm sure just in a year of doing this podcast, you've been exposed to different, you know, belief systems, different ways of thinking, different life stories and experiences. And so, how has that impacted, you know, your framing in your own mind of the good life and how you view all of that? Because you've been asking this question to everyone, right?
Yeah.
Uh, what is the good life to you? What does living well mean to you? And so, how has asking that question and being exposed to so many different backgrounds and stories and, you know, life experiences impacted your view of it?
I think the biggest thing that, it just really confirms that there's no one size
Mm-hmm.
fits all, that it's nuanced, that it's
Mm-hmm.
complex. The world is a very complex and sophisticated world, and it requires nuance to deal with it. And I feel so blessed, man, to learn from all these people. It's just fun. I enjoy these conversations. I had no idea it would be this fun to me, this much
Yeah.
fun and this enjoyable. And there's moments when it's challenging. I have a lot of self judgment about my capacity to articulate myself. That's a thing that I have. And then when that pops into my mind, I really can't articulate myself in those moments
Uh-huh.
because my mind is like, I have a crazy mind where I'm just like, leave me alone, man. Let me just
Yeah.
be. So I've learned so much about that. I think I'm learning not to be so judgmental on myself about my imperfections. Learn that, man, each one of us, everybody has jewels to share. And another big thing, folks, when you ask that question about what do you
Mm-hmm.
recommend for someone, when I say keeps asking questions of yourself and others, it may land. Someone may say the same thing to you that someone else said, but it may land indifferently because the
Mm-hmm.
nuance, the way that they said it may be slightly different. Or one change of word, or
Mm-hmm.
one change of inflection of the voice that like captures you in a way that someone else said it, or the
Yeah.
other person said it in a way that primed you for
Yeah.
what the other person is going to reveal to you. So
Or you
I,
had something go on that day that made it,
yeah.
you know, different, right? It's yeah.
So I've learned that being open and receptive um, to hearing the same thing sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
because it's going to land differently based on what, like, where you are in that
Right,
moment,
right,
and
right.
also the how it was how it was offered up to you.
Mm-hmm.
um yeah, and that, like, hey, it's a process of discovery. There is no one way, and enjoy the ride of learning about what living well means from so many different people. And that's, again, I hope that this podcast encourages folks to go out and have those conversations, because having those conversations is what's going to lead to a better world, I think,
Yeah.
and more people flourishing and living a better life.
Well, and I can say, as someone, you know, who's listening regularly, even if it's not me having the conversations, it's me coming with a open mind, right? Coming with the idea that, hey, I heard Broderick talking with this person and they both had this idea, and maybe I don't totally agree with it, but that's interesting. And now I can just come forward with, like, hey, I'm just going to be open and curious and kind to whoever I'm faced with. Now I know it's your pod, and I could talk to you forever in a day. And we, you know, we have times where we go and go and go, but you know, I also want to respect your time, and you know, we can either go to the last question of what's the last thing you want to leave people with, or you know, if there are other thoughts that you want to explore. Again, I mean, we can. I could dive everywhere with you, Brad, but yeah, do you want to go to that part now of, hey, you know, what's the last thing that you want to leave with everyone?
So before I do that, yeah,
Yeah.
we are coming to a close. I want to let everyone know where I'm going with this podcast. I think, again, my objective is to inspire more
Mm-hmm.
conversation, dialogue. My objective is to build a community
Mm-hmm.
of people who are interested in exploring this. I know I'm doing the podcast, but I love this and I think this is
Mm-hmm.
so good. I'm experiencing the goodness and how it is transforming me. And I'm assuming,
Yeah.
you can say, like, how's it affecting you as a listener? Because it's, I don't know, it's something magical that's happening. And I want more people to experience this. I want to have a community that's involved with these conversations. There are lots of things I want to share. I'm interested in possibly starting a Substack where I write a little piece and
Yeah.
probably read it. And eventually, I want to have more people coming back on to have in-depth conversations about particular subjects, particular
Mm-hmm.
themes. For instance, Taoism, Buddhism, yoga,
Mm-hmm.
and various perspectives, and just really explore that within this greater context of what it means to live well.
Mm.
So all of that stuff is what I'm thinking about and offering a lot of my services outside of this podcast through to that audience. So my dream is to build
Yeah.
up an audience that's interested in these types of explorations, and um, yeah. That I mean,
Yeah.
I have lots of ideas, which I'm not going to completely divulge all of them right now. But as the community builds, I'll start to share all types of different things for the community. Now, one thing I'm going to always offer these conversations, and I'm going to do all I can to not have commercials and all that kind of
Mm-hmm.
stuff in it. So eventually, I'm going to, ask folks to subscribe, and I'll put up a paywall for additional content to
Mm-hmm.
support it, because all these different things that I want to share and offer, it takes time, and
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
have, it's a lot. I mean, this already takes a lot of my time, but I'm going to always offer this. I think it's so important, and I'm not going to have people selling shit in the middle of it through
Mm-hmm.
it with commercials. But I will at some point start asking for support to support me in doing that, and then providing all these other services that I want to provide through it. But this will always, I guess, be free. These
Mm.
main conversations that I release every week with different people, that's always going to come along, regardless if you become a paid subscriber or not.
Mm-hmm.
But those who end up becoming paid subscribers, you are contributing to the community and helping me be able to put more energy and time into this and sustain myself. So I'm into
Yeah.
the podcasting, man. I want to do more and
Yeah.
more and more and more stuff through it, and yeah, I'm gonna need the audience support when I do ask of that. But I'm just gonna keep doing it
Yeah.
as it is right now, and as time goes, that will come into play.
So potentially like a Patreon type of page or something like that,
Yeah,
where
exactly.
you're able to, have bonuses or extra stuff where people that are interested can go deeper.
Yeah,
One of these days you're gonna have to get that book done too, so that I can at
I
least
know,
get
right?
that and read it.
I
But
know. I
um,
know.
I love it, man. I love the vision for the direction forward. Are there any guests that you have upcoming that you're really excited about that you want to share now, or just like stay tuned
Surprise.
and
Stay
yeah,
tuned.
yeah, stay tuned. All right.
Stay tuned. I'm having some fun ones, man.
Oh,
Fun
good,
conversation.
good,
I think
good.
I had fun doing them. So,
Yeah,
there. Yeah, you'll see.
that'll be
And
fun. Yeah.
yeah, and then I guess that last question you asked was, what I want to lead the audience with. Hey, same thing, man. I keep saying throughout, be open to learning. I think hopefully, I know we spent a lot of time in this episode, talking about unpacking my story, a little bit of it at
Mm-hmm.
least. The biggest thing that I take home, I hope you take from that is, um, be open,
Mm-hmm.
learn, try to learn as much as you can. Try to be a loving person to the best of your ability, and care for yourself, care for others. Um, yeah, and
Yeah.
educate yourself. Work on developing yourself, evolving yourself to be an expression of something beautiful in the world. That's my. I guess I'm giving a
Yeah.
recommendation, but that's what I attempt to do, and I hope more folks attempt to do that. Even if you can use, of course, you can use different language. Even if you use different language, even love is not your thing, and maybe I don't
Mm-hmm.
know. kindness is your thing or compassion is your thing, fine. But whatever it is, I encourage more learning,
Yeah.
growing, developing oneself.
Well, and that's what I take away from our conversation today, Rod, is just continue to expose yourself to different things, and continue to learn. Continue that educational journey, and I think I've heard it said before too. If you're not growing, you're dying, right? If you're not learning, I kind of feel the same way. And so I appreciate it, man. I appreciate this honor of being able to just chat with you and connect with you, and uncover a little bit more of my brother from another mother that I didn't have. Like, we haven't had this conversation. This wasn't audience. This wasn't scripted. We were just
No,
connecting as we do, and I appreciate you, man. And yeah, thank you for letting me ask you the questions this time. Turn the tables on you.
absolutely, man. Thank you so much for doing this. I know the audience has some members of the audience has asked me to do something like this, and I wasn't going to do a solo one. I just looking in the camera, talk about myself. I'm not that into myself like that. I'm not saying other people are by doing that, by the way, but it's just me.
Mm-hmm.
I like being in the backdrop, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
But this has been great, man. I stumbled along the way, and
Nah, dude.
but I feel good about it. And thank you so much for asking me these questions and having this conversation with me.
Of course, man. I love you, brother.
I love you too, man. Thank you so much for tuning into the show. I hope this conversation has inspired you to reflect on your own views of the good life. If you enjoyed the show and want to hear more inspiring and thought-provoking conversations, please follow, write a review, and rate us on your favorite podcast app. If you are tuning in on YouTube, please hit that like button and subscribe. Your support is very much appreciated.